There's a version of you that so many people know well. The agreeable one. The easy one. The one who's always fine with whatever the group decides. Who never makes things difficult. Who somehow always knows what other people need before they even ask. And there's another version of you that almost no one has met. The one with actual opinions. The one who's tired. The one who wanted something different but said yes anyway. Because saying yes felt safer than the alternative. If you've spent years being the first version so completely that you've started to lose track of the second, then something in you already knows what this reflection is about. Maybe you've noticed it in the small moments. The way you agree to plans and feel a quiet sinking as you do it. The way you soften your opinion mid-sentence when you sense the other person disagrees, reshaping it into something more comfortable before you've even finished the thought. The way you can spend an entire evening making sure everyone else is happy and go home unable to say whether you enjoyed it. Because the question never really came up. The way someone else's disappointment lands in your body, like it's your fault, like you did something wrong, simply by having a limit. For a long time, this way of moving through the world may have felt like kindness, and in some ways, it was. But underneath the kindness, there was often something else. A quiet fear that if you weren't useful enough, agreeable enough, easy enough, you might not be worth keeping around. If any of this feels familiar, I want you to settle in. Not because you're broken, and not because you need fixing, but because there's a part of you that has been waiting a very long time to be heard. And this might be the moment it finally gets to speak. When adapting becomes disappearing. Let's start gently with how this happens in the first place. Because almost no one chooses to lose themselves on purpose. It usually begins as something that looks a lot like care. You learn to read a room. You learn to sense what others need. You learn to adjust yourself, just slightly, to keep the peace, to smooth things over, to make the people around you comfortable. And it works. People appreciate you. You become the one everyone relies on. The one who's so easy to be around. The one who never causes a problem. But here's the quiet thing that happens underneath all that adapting. Every time you set aside what you wanted in order to give someone else what they wanted, you sent yourself a small message. Your preference matters a little less than theirs. And when you send yourself that message enough times, over enough years, you can stop noticing your own preferences altogether. Not because they disappeared, but because you stopped asking. This is how someone can arrive at a strange and disorienting place. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel like a stranger to yourself. You can be the person everyone turns to and have no idea what you actually think about anything. Because for so long, your job was to reflect other people back to themselves rather than to be anyone in particular. Have you ever been asked what you wanted? Where to eat? What to watch? How you really felt about something? And drawn a complete blank? Not because you didn't care, but because you'd spent so long tuning into everyone else's signal. that you'd lost the frequency of your own. That blankness isn't emptiness. It's not that there's no one home. It's that the person who lives there learned, a long time ago, to stay very quiet. And quiet, when it goes on long enough, can start to feel like absence. But you were always in there. You just weren't allowed much room to speak. Why? No. Can feel like a crime. So now, perhaps, you're beginning to change. You're starting to notice the exhaustion. You're starting to want to say what you actually mean. And you might have expected that, to feel free. Instead, it often feels terrible. You say no to something small, and instead of relief, a wave of guilt rolls through you. You express a preference, a real one, honestly stated, and immediately feel the urge to take it back, to apologize, to explain yourself 6 different ways, until the other person seems okay again. You decline an invitation, and then spend the rest of the evening anxious, replaying it, wondering if you've hurt someone, if they're upset, if you've damaged something that can't be repaired. This is one of the most confusing parts of the whole journey, so I want to name it clearly. The guilt you feel when you honor yourself is not evidence that you've done something wrong. It's the sensation of doing something unfamiliar. It's the alarm that goes off when you break a rule you never consciously agreed to. The rule that said your job was to keep everyone else comfortable. Always. No matter the cost to you. For years, agreeing kept you safe. Agreeing meant approval, connection, belonging. So your body learned to associate disagreement with danger, and it still does. When you set a boundary now, that old system fires. You're at risk. Fix it, smooth it over, even when nothing is actually wrong. The guilt, in other words, isn't a signal that you've become selfish. It's the growing pain of becoming honest. It tends to be loudest right at the beginning, precisely because you're doing something your whole history taught you not to do. And it does not last forever. Every time you sit with the discomfort instead of rushing to undo it, you teach yourself something new. That you can disappoint someone and survive it. That the relationship doesn't shatter. That you are allowed to take up space. That's not selfishness. That's the very beginning of self-respect. Why? Some people push back when you change. There's something that often happens when a person who has always been accommodating starts to change. And I want to prepare you for it gently, because it can be painful if it catches you off guard. Some people will not like it. When you've been reliably agreeable for years, the people around you build their expectations on that foundation. They come to count on you saying yes, on you smoothing things over, on you being the one who bends. It's not necessarily that they're cruel or using you on purpose. Most of the time, they simply got used to a dynamic that worked well for them. So when you start to shift, when you say no, when you have needs of your own, it can genuinely surprise them. Sometimes it unsettles them. Sometimes they push back, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something different, and different asks them to adjust to. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to turn this into a story about bad people who don't deserve you. That's not what this is. Most of the people in your life care about you. But even people who love us can resist our growth when that growth disrupts something comfortable. This is human. It doesn't make them villains. And it doesn't make you wrong. What it means is that you might go through a tender, awkward season where the old dynamics don't fit anymore, and the new ones haven't settled yet. Some relationships will stretch and adapt, and become more honest because of it. A few might loosen. That's a real loss, and you're allowed to grieve it. But here's the quiet truth underneath it. A relationship that could only survive as long as you disappeared was already asking too much of you. You are allowed to be someone people have to get to know all over again. The line between kindness and self-abandonment. Now we arrive at the question that probably worries you most. So let's slow down and give it the care it deserves. If you stop bending yourself for everyone, does that mean you're becoming cold? Selfish? Unkind? I understand why the fear is there, when kindness has been your whole identity. Any step away from constant self-sacrifice can feel like a step toward becoming someone you don't want to be. But I want to offer you a distinction that might change how you see all of this. There is a difference between kindness and self-abandonment, even though they can look similar from the outside. Kindness is something you offer from a place of fullness. It's a gift, freely given, that leaves you feeling connected rather than depleted. Self-abandonment is something you do from fear, giving not because you want to, but because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. From the outside, both might look like generosity, but on the inside, one nourishes you, and the other slowly empties you out. The truest kindness actually requires that you stay present as yourself. Because when you abandon yourself to please someone, when you say yes while quietly resenting it, when you agree while dying inside a little, you're not really giving them you. You're giving them a performance, and performances can't sustain real closeness. The people who love you deserve to be in a relationship with an actual person. One who sometimes says no, one who has needs, one who tells the truth. That's not less loving, it's more. So here is what I want you to hold on to. You do not have to choose between caring about others and caring about yourself. That was always a false choice. You can be warm and honest. You can be generous and have limits. You can love people deeply and still not be responsible for managing every feeling they have. Self-respect doesn't cancel out kindness. It's what allows kindness to be real. Being misunderstood is not proof you're wrong. Here's something that can quietly keep a person trapped for years, so it's worth naming directly. When you start to change, some people will misunderstand you. They might see your new boundary as coldness. They might read your honesty as harshness. They might decide you've changed for the worse, that you're not who you used to be, that something's gotten into you. And because you've spent your whole life reading other people's reactions as the measure of whether you're okay, their disapproval can feel like a verdict. They think I'm being difficult, so I must be being difficult. They seem hurt, so I must have done something wrong. But I want to gently pull those two things apart, because they are not the same. Being misunderstood is not the same as being wrong. Someone can feel disappointed by your no, and your no can still be completely reasonable. Someone can perceive you as selfish, and you can simply be a person with needs. Their interpretation of you is not the truth about you. It's their reaction, filtered through their own expectations, their own history, their own comfort. And while their feelings are real and worth caring about, they're not the final authority on who you are. This is a hard shift, especially for someone who learned to navigate the world by staying attuned to everyone else's approval. But it's one of the most freeing realizations you can come to. You can let someone be disappointed in you without abandoning your own sense of what's right. You can hold their feelings with compassion and still not reorganize yourself around them. Ask yourself, honestly, how much of my life have I spent trying to be understood by people, when what I actually needed was to understand myself? You don't have to win everyone's approval to be a good person. You just have to be able to look at yourself with honesty and recognize the person looking back, meeting yourself again. So who are you underneath all the adapting? This is where the reflection turns towards something hopeful, because this is where you get to find out. If you've spent years following other people's preferences, you may realize you don't fully know your own, and that can feel a little embarrassing or even sad. You might not know what music you love, only what was usually playing. You might not know what you'd do with a free day, only what other people expected you to do with it. You might not know what you actually think about 100 small things, because your opinion always quietly rearranged itself to match whoever you were with. That's okay. You're not too late, and nothing is missing. You just get to start paying attention. Rediscovering yourself doesn't happen through some dramatic act of reinvention. It happens in tiny, almost invisible moments of noticing. The next time you're choosing something small, a meal, a plan, a way to spend an hour, you pause just for a second and ask yourself what you would want if no one else's opinion were in the room. You might not know at first. Ask anyway. The muscle of preference is weak from disuse, but it grows back with attention. This one. Not that one. This feels good. That doesn't. Slowly, from 1,000 small honesties, a self begins to take shape. The same is true of your values, your opinions, your dreams. Somewhere in you, underneath the years of accommodation, there are things you actually believe, things you care about, things you might have wanted for your own life, but set aside because there wasn't room, or because wanting felt too risky, or because someone else's dream took up all the space. You're allowed to go looking for those now. You're allowed to want things again, even things that surprise you, even things no one else understands. What did you love before you learned to be so easy to be around? What would you try if you weren't worried about being judged? Who might you become if you gave yourself permission? You don't have to answer all at once. You just have to stay curious. The choice that changes everything. If there's one small practice that can quietly transform this whole process, it's learning to pause before you automatically agree. For most of your life, the yes has probably been instant someone asks. And before you've even checked in with yourself, the agreement is already out of your mouth. It's automatic, reflexive, faster than thought. Because for so long, agreeing was the safest thing you could do. So the practice is simply this. Create a small gap between the request and your response. When someone asks something of you, instead of answering right away, you pause. You take a breath. You give yourself the length of a single moment to ask a question you may never have asked before. Do I actually want to do this? That pause feels enormous at first. It can feel almost rude, like you're doing something you're not allowed to do. But that tiny space is where your real answer lives. It's where you get to notice the difference between the yes you offer freely and the yes you give out of fear. Sometimes, after pausing, you'll still say yes. And it'll be a truer, warmer yes because you chose it. And sometimes you'll realize the honest answer is no, and you'll get to say that instead. You're allowed to buy yourself time. Let me think about it and get back to you, is a complete and gracious sentence. You don't owe anyone an instant answer. And the people worth keeping close will not begrudge you a moment to consider your own life. That pause is where you begin to belong to yourself again. Boundaries without the war. Let's talk about boundaries, because this is where a lot of gentle people get stuck. When you've spent your life avoiding conflict, the idea of setting a boundary can feel violent. Like you'd have to become angry, cold, or confrontational to do it. And so you avoid it, and the resentment builds until it finally comes out in a way that feels much bigger than you meant. But a boundary, at its heart, is not an act of aggression. It's not a punishment. It's not revenge for all the times you gave too much. A boundary is simply you telling the truth about what you can and can't do, clearly and kindly, and then honoring it. Notice the two things a healthy boundary doesn't need. It doesn't need anger. You can say no calmly, warmly, without any edge at all. The firmness comes from clarity, not from heat. And it doesn't need a long explanation. This is a big one for people who over-explain. So let me say it plainly. You do not have to justify a boundary until the other person agrees with it. You can say, simply, I can't make it, but thank you for thinking of me, and then stop. You don't need 3 reasons and an apology. The urge to over-explain usually comes from a hope that if you just explain well enough, the other person won't be disappointed. But you can explain your way out of someone else's feelings, and you don't have to try. A boundary said once, kindly, is enough. There's a quiet dignity in a boundary that isn't defended and isn't dramatized. It just is. That doesn't work for me. I'd rather not. I need to sit this one out. Simple, clear, no war. You're not fighting anyone. You're just telling the truth about your own limits, which you have every right to have. And when you set boundaries this way, calmly, without punishment, without a case to argue, something interesting happens. The people who respect you will adjust, and you'll start to trust yourself in a way you couldn't before, because you'll know that you can protect your own energy without becoming someone you don't. When not everyone approves, here's a truth that might sting a little, and then, if you let it, set you free. Not everyone is going to approve of the real you, and that has to be okay. For so long, approval has probably functioned as your compass. If people were happy with you, you were on the right track. If someone was upset, you'd done something wrong. But if you keep that compass, you can never fully become yourself. Because being yourself means, inevitably, that some people won't like it. The more honest you become, the more you'll encounter people who preferred the version of you that always said yes. I won't pretend that's painless. It isn't. There's a real grief in accepting that you can't be universally liked, especially when being liked has felt like survival. But consider the alternative. The only way to keep everyone's approval is to keep disappearing, to keep shrinking yourself to fit whatever shape each person wants. And a life spent doing that isn't really a life. It's a permanent performance for an audience you can never fully please anyway. So you get to make a different choice. You get to decide that your own respect matters more than everyone's approval. You get to become someone who can be disliked and still know their own worth. This doesn't make you arrogant or cold. It makes you free. Because a person who no longer needs everyone to approve of them can finally offer the world something real. Their honest self, take it or leave it. No more performances. And here's the beautiful part. The people who love the real you, who stay for the honest version, who enjoy your actual opinions and respect your actual limits, those relationships will be worth more than 100 relationships built on your disappearance. Relationships that can hold the real you. Because this was never about pushing people away. I want to be really clear about that. Because sometimes the message of stop pleasing everyone gets twisted into trust no one, need no one, wall yourself off. That's not freedom. That's just a different kind of prison. The goal isn't to stop caring about people. The goal is to build relationships where you don't have to disappear in order to be loved. When you start showing up honestly, with your real preferences, your real limits, your real opinions, you begin to find out which of your relationships can hold the real you. Some will surprise you. Some people, once you stop managing their comfort, will actually meet you with relief, glad to finally know what you really think. glad to be in a real relationship instead of a polite one. Honesty, offered kindly, tends to invite honesty in return. The connections that survive your becoming real are the ones built on mutual respect. And those are the connections worth pouring yourself into. This is what makes the whole journey worth it. Not a life of cold independence, but a life of genuine closeness. The kind that's only possible between two people who are both actually there. You can't be truly known by someone if you're always performing. You can't be truly loved for who you are if who you are stays hidden. So every honest thing you offer, every real preference you voice, every kind boundary you hold, is an invitation to a deeper kind of connection, and the one you had when you were busy keeping everyone comfortable. You're not learning to need people less. You're learning to be with them more honestly. And that is a far richer thing. The person you're becoming. So let's return one last time to the question we started with. Who are you when you stop pleasing everyone? You're not becoming a colder person, you're becoming a truer one. The uncertainty you feel right now, the guilt, the loneliness, the strange sense of not quite knowing yourself, is not the sound of you losing who you are. It's the sound of you finally meeting who you are. It's what it feels like when a self that was quiet for a very long time begins, tentatively, to speak. Be patient with that self. It's been waiting a while, and it may come out slowly. Some days you'll honor yourself beautifully, and some days you'll slip right back into the old yes before you even notice. And that's fine. This isn't a test you can fail. It's a relationship you're rebuilding, the most important one you'll ever have, the one with yourself. You will get to a place, I promise you, where the guilt quiets and the honesty comes more easily. Where saying what you mean stops feeling dangerous and starts feeling like coming home. Where you can be kind without abandoning yourself, close to people without disappearing into them, generous without being emptied. Where you look at your own life and recognize the person living it. So let me leave you with this, and I want you to hold it close. You are not becoming difficult. You are becoming honest. You are not becoming selfish. You are becoming whole. You are not losing yourself. You are finally, after all this time, beginning to know yourself. And the person you're becoming, the honest one, the real one, the one with preferences and limits, and a voice of their own. That person is someone you can trust, someone you can respect, someone you can, at long last, be glad to be. Take your time getting to know them. There's no rush. You have your whole life ahead to spend, at last, as yourself. If this reflection reached something in you, I'd love for you to stay. Subscribe to The Healing Voice for weekly 30-minute reflections like this one. Gentle, honest conversations about healing, self-worth, emotional growth, peaceful relationships, and the quiet, beautiful work of living a life that's truly your own. Whenever you need a place to feel understood, this space will be here for you. Be gentle with yourself this week. The real you is worth every moment of getting to know.